So what do most people want in life? If you ask them, they'll probably give you a list of things they would want to get. But deep down inside, I'm sure most people, what are searching for in life is happiness. So what is happiness? How do you achieve it? And not only that, how can you maintain it for a long period of time? So it's very hard for yourself to think about this, because humans are terrible at understanding themselves because of our emotions and the filters that we have and these things around us. The way we've been brought up is very hard to actually psychoanalyze yourself and determine what makes you happy. So if we turn it around, we can actually think about what we would want our children to have so that they would be happy. And that way you kind of put it onto a third party. And I have 4 children, and it's very clear the things that I would like my child to have even before they're born. As soon as you start thinking about them, as soon as you start imagining what kind of face they're going to have, how they're going to grow up, their personality, there are 3 key areas which you really hope that, they're strong. So those 3 areas are, on the one hand, it's health. Every parent will tell you what they want from their child the most is health. Okay? The second area, of course, is intelligence. Because, with all the health in the world, if you want to succeed in life, you have to have some intelligence, which is the ability to solve problems. And last but not least is to be a good person. We all talk about the people that are dear to us, that they're all good people. And we want that the most for our children so that they can fit into society and they can, have happiness through bonding with other people, creating friendships, etc. Okay? So these 3 areas are key. Now, each area can be broken down into subgroups of different kind of importance. So for example, if we take health, the first thing that comes to mind is you want your child to have 10 fingers, 10 toes. You want them to develop properly and not to have, a problem with their body. So the first thing you would want is for their body to develop properly. Okay, to have a healthy body. On the other hand, you also want to make sure that they have a healthy mind. Okay, healthy mind is extremely important. You can be an athlete, being incredibly fit, have the best body in the world, but if mentally you have a problem, that's really going to hinder you. And the third one is, even though you might not think about it right before your child is born, eventually you want your children to be able to give you children. Okay, so you want them to reproduce. You want them to be healthy so that they can have children of their own and they can experience and extend the lineage, I guess. So obviously the intelligence is very important in our society because it's the key to being successful. If you're intelligent, it opens up a lot of doors. Now, intelligence actually, we talk a lot about IQ, but in reality, there are 3 different attributes that you can use to analyze the intelligence of a person. Okay? Intelligence, in reality, is the ability to solve problems. And our brain uses data sets, which essentially are things that we learn during our life. They're either taught to us, we learn it by imitating, we learn it by reading books, and the more we learn, the more data sets we accumulate. Now, there are people that are able to accumulate a lot of data sets. There's some people that you ask them a question, off the hat, they just give you an answer right away. And you go, my God, this guy's intelligent. Okay? So the first attribute to intelligence, the easiest one to recognize, is actually quantity. Okay? So if you're able to store a large quantity of data sets, then you come across as being a lot more intelligent. If you read a lot of books, you're going to have by default a lot of quantity. In order to get A grades in school and get the best grades possible in college, you need to have the ability to store a high number of quantity of data sets. Okay. The second type of attribute is, and I can talk about this in another video to go more in depth, but the second one is the quality of the data sets. Now, let me explain. Everyone has a reality distortion. So you see things through your eyes with your own perspective. You either have it with your own, you come with your background, your culture, the way people speak, and your brain is discarding information constantly. It's focusing on details that it needs, and the rest it just discards it. So your version of reality is just your version. It's not reality for everyone else. So there's certain people that are able to identify that, yes, they do have a quality distortion, and they're able to identify how much of their information they perceive is being distorted, while others believe that everything they see is fact and everybody else sees the same thing. So obviously we all have different levels of quality in these data sets. So this would be right here. Quality. So apart from the quality of the data sets and the quantity, the third attribute that separates us is the ability to analyze the data sets and to create density with those data sets. What that means is that if you think about what you have learned and you link things together and you find common denominators and you start to understand how things actually work, you can actually come to conclusions far beyond what you've been taught, far beyond what you've learned on a book. You can learn things just through observation and thought, okay? And that is called density. Now I can talk about this a lot more in another video. Okay, the third attribute of happiness, or what we want our children to have, is to be a good person. Okay, everyone wants their friends, their family, their children to be good people. Now, that can also be broken down into three different elements. The easiest one to come up with is actually the ability to bond. So you want your child to have a good ability to make friends, to create relationships. You know, you don't want your child to be in the corner of a playground all by himself and nobody wants to be his friend, okay? So bonding is very important. You also want your child to be responsible. So to have responsibility. Now, obviously, you want your child to have discipline, responsibility, take care of things. And the third, last but not least, is you want your child to have empathy. Okay? Empathy is just the ability to feel what other people feel and to understand what other people are going through so you can connect with them at a deeper level. So these are basically the three attributes for being a good person. And what is really interesting is when you put them all together, they actually create a quite cool, at least an interesting looking pattern where they all kind of fit into each other. So if you want your child to have, remember, health, to be a good person, and intelligence, if you look at the different attributes, so you want them to be healthy in the body, you want them to be a good person in bond, and you want them to be intelligent in terms of having a high quantity of data sets, these three, what is interesting is that these center ones are the three that will provide us the instant happiness, the instant gratification. So just think about an ice cream you've not had since you were a child, and just imagine tasting that again. That'll give you instant happiness. And obviously, you're providing the body with nutrients that it needs, so it's feeding the body. Okay. Also, when you see a good friend that you haven't seen in a long time, you bump into him in the supermarket. What's going to happen is that's going to reinforce your bonding. It's going to give you instant happiness, that bonding. And with quantity of data sets, these are actually candy for the brain. So when you learn something interesting, it's like, a light turns on. When you buy a new pair of shoes, when you get a new iPhone and you touch it, or an Android, and it's nice and shiny, and all these new things that we buy or we experience, and all that excitement, the anticipation, all those are, let's say, toys or candy for your brain, as these are very easily added as new data sets. You don't need to work hard to get them, like when you go to college and you need to learn accounting rules or tax rules or something. It's hard. So these quantity of data sets, that candy, is easy to achieve and provides instant happiness. What is the problem with these in the center? The problem is that the same way they provide instant happiness, they also go away pretty quickly. So if you see a good friend in the supermarket, you'll be happy, and it'll probably make you happy the rest of the day, but the next day, it'll probably wash away. The same thing as, if you get if your back hurts and you get a massage, then that's going to feel pretty good, but then it's going to wear out. So these happiness, they tend to go up and down. And that's why I call this model a membrane. When you're happy, the membrane goes up. When you're unhappy, the membrane goes down. So it's kind of a fluctuating membrane there. So how do these happiness items, or these items that provide instant happiness, how do these connect with the ones outside? And it's actually very interesting. When you combine health in the mind with the quality of your data sets, when you combine these two, okay, this is harder than I anticipated. So when you combine these two, you actually, a person with high quality and a high mental health will actually be someone with high EQ. So high EQ is high emotional intelligence. And it's the ability of a person to read others, to read other people, to understand them, to read other cultures, to understand them, to read their own culture and understand them, and therefore understanding why people do what they do. That's the main key. When you combine down here, you combine density and your intelligence, which is brought upon by thought and by reflection on the things you have learned, and you combine it with responsibility, then this combination here is going to give you IQ. So IQ is the understanding of things and how they work. So if you have high IQ, you can probably recognize how to fix a problem a lot better than a person with lower IQ. And then the final one, this one took me a while to figure it out, but it totally makes sense. When you combine the health in our, let's say, reproductive ability and with empathy, you're achieving selflessness. Okay? Just think of a parent, what they go through when they have, let's say, their first child. They pretty much give up everything in their life for that child. Everything that used to be important before stops being important. Everything centered around that child and their health, their, and their well-being. Okay? So that's selflessness. Selflessness, I see it as a mixture between a Buddha or and a Jedi, let's say. Someone that really doesn't think about themselves, but they think about others. Now, how do these relate? So that's actually an interesting point. And these three, understanding how people work, which is EQ, understanding how things work, which is IQ, and selflessness, which is understanding how you work yourself. These three are actually support mechanisms for the instant happiness on the inside. So let me explain a little bit how that works. Okay, so let's say that you achieve instant happiness from bonding. Okay? You're in high school, you make new friends, you bond, it makes you very happy. Okay? Now, what happens if suddenly your 2 or 3 best friends, they don't want to be your friend anymore? Well, it's devastating. The way to handle this is with a support structure. And the way it works is that the support structure for bonding would be EQ, which is emotional intelligence. So the stronger your emotional intelligence, the less your bonding happiness, which is going up, and unhappiness, which is going down, will fluctuate. So the stronger your EQ, the less it'll move. So if you look at the model that I drew over here, in this case, if you have a strong EQ, you will not be relying as much on bonding happiness. Okay? And as a matter of fact, if you think about it, people with high EQ usually don't like to be around a lot of people. They usually have a few good friends, and they're not really extroverts. They're more introverts. And the same thing happens with high IQ. High IQ is the support structure for your bodily pleasures. And if you think about it, it makes sense. People with high IQ usually they're slimmer. They don't fancy food as much. They don't rely on bodily pleasures as much. They usually like to spend the time thinking and planning and observing. That's usually, and learning new things. And then the last one is the quantity of data sets, which is actually your candy for your brain. The support mechanism would be selflessness. And it totally makes sense, because when you're selfless, essentially you give up everything that you're identified with. So you give up things that they no longer matter. And that's the best way to get to know yourself. So once you understand this, this was definitely a good tool to understand how people's happiness goes up and down and how they're able to manage it. You will notice that you have friends that are always happy, and you'll notice that you have friends that are having problems. I think the main idea here is to take a step back and think about EQ, how people work, how societies work, how the people around you work. IQ, think about things, how they work. And selflessness is about understanding yourself. And as Einstein once said, the true value of a human being can be determined by the degree in which he has attained liberation of the self, which is selflessness. I hope you found this model interesting, and I just wanted to share it. I thought it was fun putting it together, and in my head, it totally makes sense. So the key to happiness is understanding the people around you, understanding the things that surround you, and also the key is to understand oneself. I get the feeling that if you get to that level, you'll achieve happiness for a long time. I hope you enjoyed this. Take care. Bye-bye.